Ladies and gentlemen, to moderate our final spotlight session today, please welcome back Alex Dehgan.
We're going to be talking about restoration and restoring nature. And there's an amazing opportunity we have in this. The increasing abandonment of marginal lands creates new opportunities to take pressures off of pristine forests, to better connect fragmented habitats that were once intact, and to create new opportunities for reclaiming biodiversity that we've lost. But it raises an additional question of what we're trying to do. The term rewilding, the definition suggests that wild is the ideal ecosystem state, but do we understand what wild means? We've barely begun to understand the number of species that even exist on the planet, and new forms of life and species continue to be discovered as well as their interactions. How do we know that much of what we've studied hasn't already been inexorably changed? And what does restoration mean when ecosystems have moved on, but some species and even conservationists have not? The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change suggests more than half the species on the planet are on the move. Entire communities are being reformed. At what point do we rebuild, given our baselines have shifted, that climate change is reorganizing entire ecosystems and the communities within them? As an evolutionary biologist, I know that history and biological systems inexorably move forward, not backward. How do we build for the future rather than that of the past? How do we keep the processes that we need, but perhaps understand that species themselves or those ecosystems may even change? These are some of the tough questions this amazing group of thought leaders may choose to take on. And we have an extraordinary group of conservation leaders. Let me ask them all to come up and please join us. And I'm going to ask Cristián Samper to come to the podium. And please welcome Cristián and the rest of our panel.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. And it's great to be here with you. And I want to say thank you for this extraordinary conference and group of people. It's a really great set and a very important topic. Let me start on a personal note. As Alex knows well, and Carlos and others, I grew up in Colombia. In Bogota, as a young kid, I spent time hiking in the Andes. I did my PhD fieldwork in a place called La Planada Nature Reserve in the southwestern part of Colombia. But like many tropical biologists, part of what we've seen is that those places that we studied, those places where I published scientific papers describing species and places and processes, have been transformed. And most of those areas have been lost. And that's in my lifetime. That's just in the last 30 years. And many people could tell you the same story. Pat Wright, seen some of this in Madagascar and many others. And I do think this is a key moment when we need to think about how we change fundamentally our work, not only in restoration, but I think the main message for us is that we need to really focus on three key words. That's the strategy that we are pursuing now at the Bezos Earth Fund in what we call our nature portfolio. We must protect what we have. We must restore what we lost. And most importantly, we need to transform the way we live. And that's obvious and it touches all the aspects of this conference, but I think communicating that clearly is really important. And I'd like to just spend a couple minutes on each of them, just to give you some examples about the kind of work we're doing, and then wrap up with a few thoughts about what this means and some other considerations that we should look at as a society. Just start with protect. I mean, this conference right now is about what we must do. And as many of you know, last December was a historic moment when the world came together and adopted the Kunming-Montreal Protocol on Biodiversity. And one of the goals that many of us pushed and was adopted was a global goal to protect 30% of the planet. That means doubling protected areas on land, quadrupling areas on the sea. So we must protect at least 30%. We could argue whether 30% is the right number or not. I just came from a lunch on mangroves where we're talking about 80% protection there. So it depends on the ecosystem. But two key issues. We must make sure we're protecting the right places. We need to use the science, we need to use the information, because it's very easy to hide behind a figure. We can protect the marginal places, the wrong places. So we need to make sure we're really focusing on those places. And we must do it by involving and engaging the local communities clearly in this. And one of the to-dos that I think is absolutely critical that we're working on is helping secure the tenure rights for indigenous peoples and local communities as key guardians and stewards. And let me give you, and one more thing that Pat and I were just talking about. We must bring together all the various stakeholders in those places to work together, because not one of them can do it at the same time. So just to give you one example, we decided to pick an easy place to work on. We picked a few geographies in the planet based on high biodiversity value, high carbon value, and political commitment. And based on that, we picked places like the tropical Andes, but we also picked the Congo Basin. Difficult place, not many people work there, and yet fundamental. So we picked 3 countries, Gabon, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Republic of Congo. And we're funding through this issue, we funded a coalition of 11 different non-government organizations, mostly internationals, but working with about 45 different local organizations. And part of the key issue we're doing there and how we're protecting it is we are actually supporting a process to identify the key biodiversity areas, but this is being done in the countries by the people in those countries. And that's a fundamental issue. This cannot be determined in Cambridge or in some place like that. It really needs to be done there with the local experts, so there's an ownership and a sense there, and that's something we're doing. More importantly, we're using that right now to meet. Tomorrow morning, we're meeting with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo to look at how we go from 16 to 30%. Which are the key places, including some of the peatlands in the Congo and other areas, and how do we really engage with them and engage with the civil societies and deal with issues like connectivity and many others that we can talk about later. But clearly, protecting alone is not enough. Many areas of the world we've lost key places, and we know that we need to design some of these areas to improve resilience, and we need to look at issues like connectivity, and we need to restore some of the key places in the right way and at the right speed. Where did my note go? Sorry. And there, the real challenge, again, in the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework, we have a very bold goal that we have now to restore 1/3 of the degraded lands in the planet. And I would add to that, it's not only the degraded areas, but really restoring some of the areas that we know have been damaged, or the whole issue of forest degradation tends to be overlooked. So we made that a second priority in terms of really focusing on restoring. And just to give you one example of the work that we're doing right now, we're focusing on restoring in East Africa, in Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi, and a little bit of Eastern DRC, in restoring some of the watersheds in some of these countries, and really working in bringing back, not only planting trees, but truly trying to restore the nature. Restoring by using more native species, restoring the right places, restoring the connectivity between some of these areas. And the nice thing about restoration is that it actually creates jobs. And that's something that's incredibly important for the economic. If you've been to a place like Rwanda, you know this. So what are some key issues that I think we need to do here? We need to, again, use the right information. We must absolutely focus on the places of the highest value. We must really create the right incentives and policies that will allow for these changes to happen in these countries. And very importantly, I think this is an area, this was mentioned this morning, where even philanthropy, even a group like the Bezos Earth Fund, even though we have $10 billion to invest, is tiny. We need to mobilize trillions of dollars. So the question is, how do we design new mechanisms and innovative finance models that allows to do blended finance? I'll come back to finance toward the end. But the third issue, of course, is even the only way we're going to be able to restore some of these areas and to conserve them is if we really reduce the pressure on these lands. So transforming everything we do from energy, I know there's another panel on energy, transforming the cities where we live like New York, but especially I'm going to focus right now on agriculture. Clearly one of the big imperatives, you all know in this audience, you've all worked on this, we all have been talking, writing about it. The real challenge is how do we produce twice the amount of food in half the amount of space? And do it nutritious and do it the right way, and very importantly, that it gets to the right people at the right time, because the real issues are on equity in terms of the food distribution. So we feel that you have to really focus on some of the win-win solutions that are there, and we know that from a climate perspective, and a biodiversity perspective, and an equity perspective, there are certain issues that need to be looked at very clearly. And one of them, clearly, has to do with cattle. And this is one of the top priorities that we have established, and we're actually starting to look at this. And that includes, yes, we must transform our diets. We must reduce our consumption. That was flagged in the issues last year. But very importantly, the world is not going to stop eating meat, so we need to start redesigning the way we produce meat. as well. So one of the new initiatives that we're launching is what we basically call Cow 2.0. We are going to have some cows. How do we redesign it? And that means redesigning everything, from the genetics, the breeds, the microbiomes using the solutions that we have right now, the agro-silvopastoral systems, and the solutions that we have right now at our tips. But we actually are pretty convinced that we have the tools and the technology and knowledge where we could reduce 30 to 40% of the methane emissions within 3 or 4 years if we deployed it fast enough and well enough. So we're building a portfolio of projects to look at this and really try and deploy them in places like Brazil. And Carlos is going to talk a lot more about this issue. So let me finish with 2 other overarching comments, and I'm sure we'll have a chance in the panel to talk a little bit about this. 2 very important issues. One is around equity and inclusion. Let us not forget that this is a real issue where the biggest challenges and many of the marginal populations are being hit disproportionately hard. Issues like securing tenure rights for indigenous peoples is a fundamental issue. Communities, when I go to a place like Brazil, and I've been there recently with Carlos, I'm meeting with the government, and he'll talk a lot more about this. But one of the key priorities that we're supporting right now is how do we work with the government of Brazil to help designate and secure 50 million hectares of Amazonian forest as indigenous territories or protected areas now, because this is the moment to do it. There's a political will. How do we get this done quickly? And this will empower and recognize the customary rights of these people who can be really good guardians of these lands. And you heard about it this morning with Domingo and some of the work that these communities are doing. And inclusion, meaning not only those people here, but very importantly, the different countries. As I mentioned, I worked in Colombia, and it's so often that we come to these conferences or the scientific conferences in the US or Europe. But you know, part of what we need is to really build this capacity and engage the people in these countries. I had the fortune to create and build the Humboldt Institute, the National Biodiversity Institute in Colombia. I work closely with my friends in Mexico and Conavio, the INBio, and others. Part of what we need is what a friend of mine calls not scaling up, but scaling out. It's really about taking a model like Conavio or Humboldt or Zambia in South Africa. We need 50 of these things across the world. We don't need them globally in these data sets. We need to actually build this capacity in the countries now, and we need to get that knowledge working and building what a friend of ours, Jorge Soberon, calls the boundary institutions. These institutions that are translating science into the policy. That's something we clearly need to do. And I'll finish a little bit with finance. Clearly, one of the commitments out of, again, the Montreal Protocol, one of the big breakthroughs is we need to mobilize billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. You've all seen the papers, you've seen them, the estimate is 700 billion, perverse incentives, all the issues, but we need new innovative models. And I just want to finish with one example at a lunch that I was at yesterday that some of you probably heard around in the audience, which is a debt for nature swap, but commercial debt, not sovereign debt, which was done for Galapagos Islands. This was just closed at the end of last year. This is a $1.6 billion deal that was done through a very interesting arrangement where Ecuador took $1.6 billion, refinanced it, basically for $600 million, saved $1 billion, which corresponds to about 7% of the national debt, commercial debt that Ecuador had. And as part of that, they're actually creating a sustainable endowment that's going to fund the in perpetuity maintenance of Hermandad and Galapagos Islands. And this is a good example where you had private capital, $600 million of private equity from private investors. You had the DFC Corporation providing guarantees, the IDB and others. And they basically, it was a perfect issue where in a matter of months, we could do this kind of deal. And the figure I heard yesterday at lunch that was so striking, you've all heard about Credit Suisse and UBS, they were hosting this lunch with us yesterday. That new bank combined manages $5 trillion of private investments. How do we do 1,000 Galapagos? And now, at this point, when the world and many of these developing countries are having so much of an issue in terms of their debt, how can we actually mobilize the finance in terms of alleviating some of these issues? We have the tools, we have the money, we just have to get on and scale this up and scale it out to really make some of these changes. So I think what's clear, everyone here knows we have a problem. The good news is we have the solutions, mostly, not all of them, but most of them. So I think and we also know we have the resources. There are literally trillions of dollars out there. How do we mobilize them quickly in new ways so we can actually get them to address the issues in the places that matter as fast as we can, because this will be a decisive decade. So I'm going to stop there and we can pick it up in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristián. It's my pleasure to invite up Carlos Nobre, climate scientist, Institute for Advanced Studies at the University of Sao Paulo.
Good afternoon to all. Thank you very much for the invitation. I will talk about the Amazon, but we are very concerned. Let me start just saying, as you've seen, 2 weeks ago, UNFCCC launched the report, the Global Stocktake report, showing that if we continue the way we're going, by 2050, the temperature will be between 2.4 and 2.6 warming. So, as you know, also a lot of people start talking about overshooting. You know, it's impossible to control. Emissions are still very high, and we are going to get to more than 2.4, 2.6, and then in the second half, we find technological solutions. However, for the Amazon, that's impossible. If we really exceed even 2 degrees, we are going to put the Amazon under tremendous risk. Why do I say that? Because most of the southern Amazon, this is large area, more than 2 million square kilometers. We are at the edge of a tipping point. And this is a synergistic combination of global warming everywhere in the world is inducing these extremes, climate extremes. In particular, the Amazon is extreme droughts. Historically, there used to be one severe extreme drought every 2 decades associated with El Nino. Now, in the last 20 years, we have had 4 severe droughts, 2005, 2010, 2015, 16. This one associated with El Nino, and 2020. The other 3 droughts associated with warming North Atlantic, associated with the thermohaline circulation in the Atlantic to becoming weaker. So this is global warming. However, synergistic interaction with land use change. So we have in the Amazon about 2 million square kilometers, 35% of the Amazon forest deforested or degraded, particularly over southern Amazon. So when you replace the forest by pasture, during the dry season, pasture recycle very little water. The forest recycles more water during the dry season than during the wet season. 3 times more than the pasture. So what's going on in the Amazon? So this is not a projection for the future. The dry season it's all over southern Amazon, as I said, 2.3 million square kilometers, is 4 to 5 weeks lengthier today compared to 1979. Getting longer 1 week per decade. So the dry season used to be in the southern Amazon 3 to 4 months. Now it's already 4 to 5 months. If the dry season reaches 5 to 6 months, this is the climate envelope of the tropical savanna. So it will be all becoming open canopy, degraded ecosystem. Why do I say we are at the edge of this tipping point? For the duration of the dry season, much hotter dry season, drier, tree mortality all over, from Bolivian Amazon all the way to the Atlantic, is increasing. Wet climate tree species. And and in addition to that, all southern Amazon, the forest has become a carbon source. Globally speaking, the forest remove more than 30% of carbon dioxide. The Amazon in the 1990s removed more than 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide. Now, all southern Amazon has become a carbon source, the forest. I'm not talking about emissions by deforestation, fires, the forest. So that's why I'm saying we are really at the edge of a tipping point. Therefore, we have to look for solutions. And if we let the global temperature exceed 2 degrees or getting 2.4, 2.6 degrees by 2050, forget it. All of the southern Amazon will really reach the tipping point, and we are going to lose minimum of 250 billion tons of carbon dioxide, making it almost impossible to reach the Paris Agreement targets. And also the threats to biodiversity and many other threats. The Amazonian forest has plenty of other ecosystem services, not only storing carbon. For instance, recycling water is so efficient, so they export, the river discharge is something like 220,000 cubic meters per second. The Amazon forest exports vapor to the Andes, to the south of the Amazon, 200,000 cubic meters per second. So all these ecosystem services will be affected severely. So that's why I want to raise this issue that for the Amazon itself, we should not accept overshooting. No way. Getting to 2.4, 2.6, the Amazon will, 50 to 70% of the Amazon will become open canopy degraded ecosystem. Not to say the risks to epidemics and pandemics of affecting the region with very high microorganisms diversity. So anyway, okay, this is the first part. The second part, of course, we have to look for solutions, nature-based solutions. I want just to say a few ideas that we are pursuing, including the Bezos Earth Fund is supporting many of these ideas, as Cristián already mentioned. And the first one is what we call a very large-scale forest restoration. During COP27, the Science Panel for the Amazon, we put together a science panel, Sustainable Development Solutions Network Initiative 2019, 250 scientists. We produced many reports. The first one launched during COP26. And so during COP27, we launched a policy brief, which is we call arcs of forest restoration. We need to restore at least 50 million hectares, 500,000 square kilometers, mostly over southern Amazon and along the Andes as well. It's arcs of restoration, the 2 arcs. This is important to protect biodiversity, but particularly to avoid the tipping point, because secondary forests in the tropics, they grow very fast. So if we stop deforestation, we have to get zero deforestation, zero forest degradation, and fires before 2030. And then we have to really implement a very large scale of forest restoration. Forest restoration, as you know, China is number 1, US is number 2, but we have to make the Amazon very important in forest restoration. So this is an important initiative. Fortunately, the good news that we are seeing now in this year in most Amazonian countries, particularly in Brazil, we have had almost 50% reduction in deforestation in the first 8 months of the year. So it would be very important. More than 90% of deforestation in the Amazon is illegal, associated with organized crime. So this is the important solutions, nature-based solutions that we have to pursue. We have to have global collaboration. A Brazilian president this morning in the initial UN General Assembly, he made the speech, and he says the importance of protecting all global tropical forests. He intends to bring to COP28 association with Congo, Basin, Southeast Asia, Basin, Indonesia, and the Amazon to make a triple initiative of these all tropical forests to sustain, to protect all tropical forests. This is one initiative. And the other initiative that I think, of course, forest restoration is very important to prevent the tipping point. The other initiative that we are promoting as well in many Amazonian countries, and particularly the Science Panel for the Amazon, we are promoting studies for developing what we call a new social bioeconomy of very healthy standing forests and flowing rivers. Just to give you one figure, agroforestry systems today in the Amazon, still very much products that are not industrialized, but still, agroforestry systems in the Amazon, they have a profit 10 times more than livestock farming, than cattle. 10 times more today. And also, they benefited 20 more employees. So this is really the way to go. You can produce a new economy, standing forest economy. So that's another initiative that we are going to do. We, all Amazonian countries, have to develop there, restore a lot of the Amazon forest, and then develop this new economy, which will benefit. The Amazon has almost 50 million people, mostly very, very poor. So this new economy, particularly with value adding, with industrialization of the forest products. And I just want to finish saying one more initiative that we are starting to develop, to discuss, to promote, is the creation in the Amazon of the so-called Amazonia Institute of Technology. We are doing a feasibility study to create in the Amazon a pan-Amazonian public-private partnership with many innovation hubs all over the Amazon for this new social biodiversity and this new economy. So we would like very much to have international global collaboration to create this Amazon Institute of Technology to do capacity development for thousands and thousands of students a year for this new social bioeconomy. So those are the many initiatives that we have to do. We pursue to get into zero deforestation, forest degradation. Really very important to save the Amazon, to protect the Amazonian people. I should say something that we say in the science panel for the Amazon, because this is really the will of all the people of Amazonian countries and all of the planet. Really, this is the Amazon we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. It's my pleasure to introduce Kate Logan, Head of Business Development in Hawaii for Terraformation. Kate.
Aloha, and I wanted to thank the steering committee and Peter for having me here today. What an amazing group of experts, and I'm truly humbled. I wanted to talk a little bit about what I know best, which is implementation. And I'd like to use some visuals, helps me speak. So at Terraformation, we help to scale native ecosystem restoration by providing complex, comprehensive support to forest restoration teams all around the world. We currently support 19 projects in 13 countries. And again, we focus on restoring complex, biodiverse, native ecosystems, truly native ecosystems. What we do is we help our global partners overcome bottlenecks. And we've identified 4 major bottlenecks at Terraformation, primarily being seed shortages. We've created seed banks that we've distributed all around the world. We also help with training, financing, and we can successfully help them restore biodiversity and support local communities and increase long-term carbon capture. You can see here on this map our global and then local sites. I say local because I live in Hawaii and that's where our R&D arm is. But we do have projects all around the world, or I should say our partners have projects all around the world. We've recently launched what's called a Seed to Forest Accelerator, and what this does is it supports organizations all around the world, and our internal projects here in Hawaii, which were on that last slide, is really the R&D. We support and provide information to our partners to help them. At the last year's conference, GF22, we identified the 10 must-haves. And at Terraformation, we embrace these must-haves. In particular, the immediate halt and reversal of loss of nature's functions and diversity. Biodiversity loss and climate change are two sides of the same coin and are driven by human economic activities and mutually reinforce one another, and increasingly threaten nature and human lives, livelihoods, and well-beings are all around the world, and neither can be resolved unless both are tackled together. So our headquarters at Terraformation is in Hawaii. Again, what we do is we support projects and organizations around the world. You can see this desertified area, and I'm sure most of you have read and heard about the wildfires on Maui. This was our pilot site, our founder's property. This beautiful place is normally a vacation destination for millions each year, but it has really unique qualities. These qualities provide a special case. 2/3 of terrestrial and marine ecosystem conditions are found on Earth, are found on Hawaii Island specifically. And 64% of the state's landmass and the longest coral reef has the longest coral reef, providing unprecedented land reef research and intervention opportunities for us. We also have massive cultural and household income ranges. We have some of the most wealthy people on our island and some of the poorest people. It's a huge range. So my team specifically, we call the Internal Forestry Operations team or the R&D team. And this is really where we implement our own research and then we test and develop solutions for restoration. We've created software, which our partners around the world use. Again, we have seed banks that we've distributed all around the world. Being founded by a tech company, we call this dog fooding, really. We just test and keep testing to help truly scale projects. Furthermore, I'm a proud person to partner with Arizona State University, in particular, working with Dr. Greg Asner, who leads the School of Ocean Futures. And we together have established the Ridge to Reef Restoration Center here at O'oma, which is on the west side of Hawaii Island. This is a center of knowledge that combines land and ocean restoration efforts in tandem. Dr. Asner has just started this Akoakoa Reef Restoration Program. These photos that you can see at the bottom, we are in the process of building the world's largest coral nursery at our headquarters. And so this demonstration site, people are able to come and see our seed bank and then to see the coral nursery, understand what it takes to create projects on land and in the sea, and inspire these millions of visitors and researchers who come to our island and then radiate out there and provide information to those all around the world. I just wanted to reinforce what our mission is, and I've heard from so many people here today how important it is to partner. Nobody can do it alone. We need everybody, and truly what Terraformation does is uplift organizations all around the world. Our mission is to restore the planet's forests to carbon capture, revitalize nature, and build thriving communities. This is one of our values. We are ancestors. We believe there's a terraformation. I invite all of you to join forces with us and help organizations around the world with their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's my pleasure to close out the end of the day with two extraordinary speakers, Lilian Pintea and Dame James Goodall. Please.
I believe we have a video address first.
Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you who are participating today, and special thanks to Dr. Peter Schlosser, Global Futures Laboratory, and ASU for organizing this meeting. Thank you for allowing me to share a few thoughts from afar. For 25 years, I spent most of my time in the forest, learning about the complex forest ecosystem, where each species of plant and animal, no matter how small, has a role to play. Those were the best years of my life, and I only left when I realized the situation outside of Gombe had changed dramatically. Right across Africa, forests were being destroyed, and chimpanzee numbers were decreasing. And then I knew I had to try to do something to help, though it seemed impossible. But I also learned about the plight of so many of the people living in and around the forests, the crippling poverty, lack of health and education facilities, the degradation of the land as their populations grew, and they moved ever further into chimpanzee habitat, risking catching new diseases. And that's when it hit me. If we can't help these people find ways of making a living without destroying their environment, well, we can't save chimpanzees, forests, or anything else. And so, with the help of George Strundon, who'd worked in the area for 15 years, we began at Takari, the Jane Goodall Institute's method of community-led conservation. A team of 7 local Tanzanians was selected, and they went into the villages around Gombe and asked the people, how can we best help you? And so we started with restoring fertility to the overused land so that they could get more food, and working with local Tanzanian authorities to improve schools and clinics. Then, as the people came to trust us, we could introduce water management programs, microfinance opportunities, scholarships to give girls for the first time an opportunity for secondary education, and we introduced family planning information. We also started up Roots and Shoots clubs, Jane Goodall Institute's program, humanitarian and environmental, for young people of all ages. The main message of this program is that all individuals matter, all individuals make an impact on the planet every day, and they can choose what sort of impact they make. And finally, thanks to Dr. Lilian Pintea, GIS, GPS, and satellite imagery were introduced, and volunteers were trained to monitor the health of the village forest reserves, a hugely important step, as most of Tanzania's remaining chimpanzees live outside protected areas. And so at this point, I would like to ask Lilian to explain why Takari is so important and why it gives us hope for the future.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you for inviting me to contribute to this important dialogue. As Jane said, when I joined the Takari team in 2000 on the ground in Tanzania, we started with using NASA Landsat satellite systems for the first time to assess and evaluate how the chimpanzee habitats, forests, and human land uses changed inside and outside Gombe National Park. We realized in horror that what it used to be this beautiful mosaic of natural forest and woodlands and grasslands, 60% of them got converted by 1999 to farmland and degraded land. We also realized, as you could see here from the Maxar satellite imagery back in 2005, that around that time, the local communities start seeing increasing deforestation, increasing land erosion and landslides outside the park on their land. So around that time, when the local communities, building on the partnership with the Takari project, started to request that they wanted to do something about these watersheds. And they decided that they would like, for the first time, to develop their village land use plans. So Facilitated by Takari, it enabled us to start bringing satellite imageries, GIS, mobile technologies with partners such as Esri, funded by USAID, supported by cloud technologies from Amazon and Google. And we are able to support and facilitate this land use plan to develop this, for the first time, this corridor of village forest reserves, which are connected to each other and also connected to Gombe. And now we can use the same satellite imagery to look back and see that village landscapes like this one in 2005 covered by degraded farmlands and landslides. Now you can see tree coming back. You can see tree coming back because of the natural regeneration of these Miombo woodlands. And these patterns are happening not just in individual villages, but across the entire network of village land forest reserves. And we just published and submitted a paper in a peer-reviewed journal documenting with field surveys that what we see from satellites is actually confirmed on the ground, that we have improvement in forest cover, we have improvement in carbon, and actually it's very similar to now what we found inside Gombe. And also the places patrolled and monitored by the village forest reserves, by the village forest monitors, actually those places are doing much better. Now, all this data which local communities have been collecting and contributing, of course, ends up in this Western Tanzania decision support system powered by Esri technologies. And that system, it's important because it helps local decision makers to interact with this data in an easy to use format and use in order to inform their actually daily management actions. Now, what local communities around Gombe have done truly inspired me. It's completely changed my view about conservation and gave me hope. And a few years ago, I had a chance to join Jane in one of those villages outside and listen from the communities, their perspective on these amazing changes on their village land. And it was amazing because people were so happy to see trees coming back. They were so happy pointing out places where water sources improved, where landslides stopped, where the mushrooms collection now it's possible, where the beehives could be set. But one woman in particular showed me this place which it was to be her farm inside the forest reserve. And now she had to move her farm an hour away in order to be outside the forest reserve. An hour walking on these steep hills, it's a major effort. So I asked if it was worth it. And she pointed to this degraded lands on the 2005 imagery and say, look, back in 2005, we didn't have many trees. You can see landslides, you can see that stream eroded. And look, now trees are coming back. The erosion stopped, the stream is improving. She then pointed back to the 2005 image and said, under that mango tree in that building, it's a school. And one day, a big flash flood happened, almost destroyed the school. I had 2 children in that school. So guess what? I better walk extra hour, but I know that my children and our children are safe because of the trees coming back. And it's really struck me because when the local village chairman with the land use planning committee went to each farmer and convinced them to move and give the land away for the forest protection, they knew that that is going to help them individually, their children, and their community. And it also struck me that this power of data and technology was unlocked not because this technology was available, which is important, but because these technologies became part of locally owned and driven decision-making processes. And they were trusted, and they were used, and they are actionable. So this is a small example of what Takari can do. And Takari basically is our holistic community-led conservation approach, which focuses on not only engaging local communities, but making sure that they own and drive the decision-making process, both development and conservation process. Just last week, I had the privilege to join the Roots and Shoots Zanzibar and Jane Goodall Institute Tanzania per invitation from the Forest Department of the government of Zanzibar to transfer some of these Takari models and approaches to 10 villages and to the Forest Department, to the Zanzibar State University and other partners. And sure enough, we know that Takari works. We verified it in DRC, in Uganda, in Senegal. We know that it's working. Like in Western Tanzania, in a very different environment, the local communities who never seen satellite imagery, never seen maps, immediately were able to find their houses, the water sites, their farms, their sacred sites. A lot of information shared and trusted with the forest department, who actually, it was the first time visiting these villages outside the forest protected area because of the lack of resources. In parallel, the roots and shoots using the same approach to map their knowledge and values on the same community map, but focusing maybe on the schools. And what was truly amazing is when suddenly the Roots and Shoots volunteers from our Roots and Shoots Zanzibar team started to interview elders about the stories, sacred sites, animals, how the forest used to be. And suddenly it all makes sense that this is happening in real communities, and those processes are just supported and unlocked to achieve, to make sure that they can achieve a better life for people, animals, and shared environment. So I'm very excited about this development, but the beginning, the work in Zanzibar just starting. And what I'm realizing that we truly need to deliver resources and capacity at the local scale for people like that, not only to be inspired and document the traditional knowledge, but really enabled to put their dreams to work and implement those aspirations. So buy our book if you want to learn more about the Takari, and please join us. Join us to scale Takari and Roots and Shoots across the globe together. And I'm going to go back to Jane now. I think she has a few more words to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lilian. I'm sure everyone can now understand why Takari gives us hope. As I travel around the world, I've realized the importance of giving people hope, because without it, we fall into apathy and do nothing. And if we all do nothing, especially our young people, we're doomed. Well, the Takari method of conserving the natural world by involving the local people, listening to their voices, is now present in other countries where JGI work to study and conserve chimpanzees and their habitats. And there are Takari-type programs in many places all around the world. I've met so many amazing people, seen so many incredible projects that demonstrate that nature is extraordinarily resilient, given a chance, and can, given time and perhaps some help, return to places we have utterly destroyed. The fact there's almost no bare hills around Gombe and beyond is but one example. And there are amazing examples of animals and plants rescued from the very brink of extinction. I've learned about them firsthand in many countries. The biggest difference between us, chimpanzees, and other animals is the explosive development of our intellect. How sad that the most intellectual creature to ever walk planet Earth has, for hundreds of years, been destroying its only home. There seems to have been a disconnect between our clever brain and our heart, where poetically we seek love and compassion. And I believe only when head and heart work in harmony can we attain our true human potential, which is huge. And let me end with what is so very important. More and more people are thinking about their own environmental footsteps, trying to live more sustainably. There's a growing understanding that there can't be unlimited economic development on a planet with finite natural resources, and that our growing populations and increasingly unsustainable lifestyles are placing unrealistic demands on our finite natural resources. In conclusion, we are indeed facing many problems in our fight to save the planet, but there are people working to solve all of those problems. And we are realizing that there is a great need to collaborate, to work together, to ensure a future for all life on our planet. Because in the end, we're realizing that humans are not exempt from extinction. Thank you.
Thank you.